Hey everyone, thanks for joining this episode of the Union Podcast. I'm Scott, and I am joined by my usual co-host, Chris Kraus. Hi, Chris.
Hey.
And John Michelsen. John Michelsen, I see Dallas in the background again, so welcome home. So we're going to finish out our document understanding series. So the first episode that we had, we're talking about the known questions, or actually the first one was the unknown questions. I have a bunch of answers and I have content, but I don't know the questions. And this would be similar to someone asking on a chat bot, looking for information, looking for product specs, what have you. The second one is I had the known questions, but I don't know the answers. I need to ask suppliers for information, for instance. But Chris, we want to talk about everything else. So everything else outside of those situations where the advancements in NLP actually make this possible, right? Some number of months ago, maybe John, you can tell us 6, 12, 18 months ago, this wasn't possible just because the GPU speeds weren't available. But Chris, what's the issue? Like if I don't find myself in one or two of those scenarios, what are we going to talk about today?
So what people don't realize is natural language processing, even outside of an LLM, is amazingly powerful. And we've been trained. Oh, intelligent document processing says, look for a structured document, look for the zip code, look to the left of the zip code, look to the right of the zip code label. Everything was very regular expression. And as John and I were joking, there's nothing regular about a regular expression. Not everybody's brain works with dot slash, dot star, pound, asterisk. It's very irregular, regular expressions. And to find things, and it was very location based. But really, lexical processing is an amazing tool. Like if I want to find a football team, do I have to put the name, or can I put the Buccaneers or the Rams and lexically match into the name of the team? Okay. When it comes to comparison of content, like, are these two statements similar, or are we finding conflicting information inside of a paragraph, or say a statement from a customer and they're unhappy? There's so many places in which we can apply natural language. And the really neat thing is it all of a sudden opens up all sorts of unstructured text. We've always been forced to think mathematically and structurally, which of course I love, but how can we think about analyzing documents in a free-form text and unstructured text? And verb-noun agreement makes a difference. And we'll have to remember that we capitalize names, proper nouns versus nouns, or not. We just let the natural language processing know those rules and figure it out for us. And that's the cool thing about Chris. I don't have to think about those things. I say, give me the name of a place. It knows what a proper noun is. It knows what a noun is and things like that. So, John, you want to talk through some of these, like how do we actually solve these different problems that people aren't thinking about, like how we've moved past NLP, what we're doing with, say, similarities in natural language processing?
Yeah. A great setup. Because you definitely have these kind of really neat new projects that you have a body of content you can expose to random questions, or you know what you want, and then inbound documents, but you got to get those answers. We talked about that. But what about all the rest of the work that you do? You're either an automation specialist or you're a business analyst who maintains requirements, and you kind of guide the development of what it is that your business is looking to do. Or you're a developer yourself, or anyone who's actually involved in kind of trying to get any kind of technology deployed. What can natural language processing do outside of those big 2-ticket items? And that's the topic. And the answer is quite a bit when you think about the use cases that Chris just already mentioned, but then add to it just validating user input, not having to make people be precise. You have too long a list, and yet you've got to get it exactly this, an item in this list, and you've got hundreds of items in the list. What are you going to do? You're going to display a drop-down list with hundreds of items, or you're going to make someone type something, then it's got to be precisely matching, or you're going to use those irregular expressions. Those are all really blunt instruments, but there's so many good capabilities in the natural language toolbox, if you will. And you don't need to use the whole toolbox the way we might in a full doc understanding use case, but you could use one or two of those tools as a part of everyday processing of all of the kinds of stuff we're doing now. What I'd hope we could do is for the non-development type person is kind of raise the awareness that you could be speccing these types of expectations into the solutions that are getting built for you. And for those on the technical side, that you guys should be thinking about these capabilities are now available. I mean, we certainly put them on the bottom shelf for you to use easily, and we've built a lot of it ourselves. But there are lots of ways you can acquire and leverage these capabilities, and they really belong in every use case. This isn't about AI anymore. And in another couple of years, we won't say AI, we'll just say software again, because that is what this is, right? We're already doing that with big data, by the way, right? Are we not tired of hearing the phrase big data? It's not that it went away. There's still big data. We just don't actually need to talk about it so much because now it's such a not natural part of the way that we do software. The same thing will be true of the Gen AI stuff. We have yet to see that awakening on other aspects of AI. We're looking for the day that happens. But we have so many tools in that toolkit. So, for example, you got a long list of items. You need to get user input. You can do a lexical fuzzy match on which of those items is closest to it. And by the way, if you get 2 or 3 that are too close, it'll tell you there's 2 or 3 that are too close. You could follow up with, how about you pick from one of these 2 or 3? So you don't have to present the user with the 100 list, which is useless. And you don't have to say, you've got to get it exactly right, otherwise I can't continue. It's a beautiful thing, right? And you just raised the usability and the user experience, and you've also reduced errors getting input into the system.
So John, it sounds like you're talking, you made a comment about a less technical user, which it's probably me, right? I'm not a software developer, but maybe this is why people always want to talk to people, right? Because the context of what I'm trying to do is lost. And like, I don't understand the system, but if I talk to a person, they can help bridge that gap. Are you saying that like NLP is better at, figuring out the context of what I want to do? And Chris, that may go to your football example, right? So with the Buccaneers is clearly a team. Is that what you're talking about? Is that the big advancement, or is it something else?
So it'd be a variety of things. But just to be super clear, in case the question was going the direction of, does AI like naturally or automatically know context? Generally not. What the context. If you provide the context and then ask your question, you will get a really good answer. If you don't, you're unlikely to get a really good answer. And a good example that Chris, you could expand on if you'd like, is the whole notion of, all right, I'm already processing inbound orders, right? So this isn't the stuff we talked about last week. This is, I already do some level of processing orders. I take them off of an EDI feed, or I get them from whatever. And one of my responsibilities is currently as a person having to deal with this is I have to validate all of the information on that order before I can go into the system. And it's an automated thing where it gets presented to me. Well, why isn't the software doing 90% of this for me? And the answer is it could, right, Chris?
Oh yeah, it could. And so if you think about an order, so many things look the same. You could have 6 email addresses. Well, I don't want the company's email address. I don't want the support email address. I want the address associated with the buyer, not the shipper. And you give that level of context to natural language, and when it finds 6 of them, it knows to throw them away, right? Or your company logo, in some cases, is in your upper left-hand corner with your address. So how do you know the difference between your address, the shipping address, the buying address? You can say it's like, exclude my address and include and review the customer's addresses inside of here to find the right one. So it's important to say what not to look for as valid as what to look for. And that is that, like, humans think through that. I was like, I would naturally skip my company's address, not because it's in the upper left-hand corner or the upper right-hand corner, because I know that's in the context of me. So we give that hint into the natural language of what not to look for is just as important as what to look for.
And if I'm doing really simple things like I need to validate the zip code, yes, 5 digits, and there's certain additional checks you can make. And there's one of those, here comes one of those irregular expressions, especially with the +4 here in the US and all that. But it's so much easier just to say the zip code needs to be near the rest of the address. And when you do that, you immediately know, right, that your likelihood of getting what you're looking for is so much higher. And so the toolbox is full of these kinds of things: fuzzy matching, lexical matching, and this is something for unfortunately the Gen AI world has sort of neglected the notion of lexical matching. And so, just real quick, semantic matching is the idea that cat and dog are closer than cat and car, right? So there's a closer correlation between those words. The lexical analysis would say none of those words are anything like each other. What are you talking about, right? Because it's more of the literal character by character construction of the individual words. So homonyms throw off lexical analysis for sure. Nothing is perfect, right? None of these analyses. So, which is why you need lots of tools in the toolbox. But there'll be times when you do definitely need to basically be able to say, okay, is this particular comment, let's say you're reading an inbound, just a simple survey, right? Is this comment related to this topic? And there you want a semantic search, a semantic analysis, right? And you want to basically, if it's at least 70% likely or correlated to the topic of what the survey is about, then I can accept the survey result or a survey answer. If it is not, then obviously I've got a bogus survey, or I got a robot filling out surveys on me, or whatever it is, right? But there will be other use cases where you'll want to be able to do that from a lexical perspective. You'll need to be able to say, wait a minute, if I'm collecting survey information about, let's say, managers inside the company, I need to know that the manager is actually named. I don't want to accidentally collect feedback on someone who's actually not the one I'm trying to collect. It's stuff like that, right? I don't want this statement associated with the wrong manager or whatever it is, positive or negative. So I need to basically then do a lexical analysis. And certainly I don't want to have to get them to have to spell my name correctly because my name is, to most people, looks misspelled. So a lexical analysis match on my name is going to catch all of those misspellings that I typically get. It's a really powerful tool in that regard, right? Think about you're calling into the call center, and there's plenty of AI projects done in call centers, but it's good for as an example bed. How, finding you, right? The customer service rep, finding you is usually the hardest part, because as soon as I say Michelsen, they're doing the Michael, and I'm not, there's no A in my last name. I don't know why. There just is no A in my last name. I'm sorry, guys. But there you go. A lexical analysis on my last name is going to catch the correct Michelsen. And there are enough of us that you could also say, instead of it's got to just be your last name, it's give me what you've got. I'm John Michelsen in Dallas. Well, boom. I mean, and that kind of very simple natural language search kind of thing would be so much more powerful than what we're doing today, which is we're filling out forms trying to figure out, okay, I found all the Michelsens and now I got to subdivide it. The point here is all applications need a new rev, right? Every application you're working with, every project you're working on needs a point of view applied to it of where am I having to be so tedious with end users, or where am I letting in bad data because I can't really validate input well, or where am I leaving to people something to do that actually, with a nice rich toolbox of NLP capabilities, I can apply those, right? And they don't sound anything like the use cases we did in podcast 1 and 2 on the topic. They sound so much like just the everyday stuff we're doing now. And we can get away from some of those irregular expressions because we really do have not much. We don't have much to use until we've gotten this toolkit in our, more recently. We got pretty rough tech for it until now. So that's really what I'd love to make sure that people get a sense of. You can actually expect a lot more. And if you're sitting there, if your job entails ever, like, make sure this thing is this, and make sure that that's correct, and make sure that I read this right, and make sure, that it better be a very rarity, because the capabilities are already exist for software to do most of that.
Yeah, John, that was, as you were talking, I was wondering, where do I put this? And then you said, every software app or application needs a new rev. Are you saying that like every app, every user interface needs to be updated with something like this?
I would take, in the way I said it, I'll say it just a little bit differently. You should definitely arm yourself with a higher level of expectation and now view any application that you use or any application that you're responsible for and say, what is it that I do right now that I could have the machine doing that I've currently got people doing or dealing with, right? When it comes to bad input, because again, just validating input is a huge space. It even gets even scary when you do this in, say, the medical field, or you do it in the financial services field, right? Bad data input was, some organization lost $5 billion. Was it? Just wasn't last year? Someone fat fingered an input. I got a really great example. This goes all the way back to 2019. We had someone who we ended up not hiring, but he was quite a pleasant gentleman, had a really interesting background, not quite a good fit for us. But when I was trying to explain to him how we are going to change the way software gets built, he said, "Oh my gosh, I got a really good example of what you're talking about." So they presented me with a time off request, and they said, "Here's your current time off balance. What do you want? What do you want to change it?" And me being a technical person, I basically said -8 because I'm going to take 8 hours away. Well, what's 40 minus -8? His ending balance in his paid time off account was 48 hours after he took a day off. Woohoo! So I mean, this guy, this is classic. Now that's really simple to do in most every UI toolkit is don't allow negative numbers. But we're trying to democratize this stuff. The people who should be building most business logic are not developers who've been bitten by that stuff. And so we've got to basically it needs to be simple. It needs to be a valid time off balance, right? It needs to be a valid time off request. So the ability for NLP to just sniff test, another thing Krista's really good at, right, is the whole outlier and anomaly detection. So where is this anomalous? It's like, wait, I've never seen a negative number for a PTO request. So I think I want to flag this, right? These are what I mean. You can take a different perspective into what you're doing, either as a user of software for what you think that software should be. Your expectations should be going up. And if you're responsible for creating it yourself, your expectations of what you can do should be going up. That's the real point.
Yeah, I think you mentioned financial services and healthcare, and those are obvious to me with tickers, with product codes, healthcare codes, right? If you miss one of those, that could be really bad. And then also, like, those are related, right? So certain healthcare codes are adjacent to another, and like you said, that you could have some anomalous behavior there. And help identify that. So I think that would be super interesting, considering the healthcare fraud, and healthcare is just everyone's just billing each other back and forth. I've never been in that industry, but it just sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, we've actually done some projects there. In fact, we're embarking on a massive one here in the next couple of weeks, and Chris is quite involved with it.
And then Chris, so based on what John was talking about and with the advancements, and then what people need to do, like what are some steps for people that are still with us? What can I do? John talked about the people in charge of building the apps need to elevate their expectations or really become educated on what's possible. Sometimes that's hard to do because everyone thinks AI is magic. So what can we do?
Yeah, so there's that in between of magic and actually NLP, natural language processing. Generative AI is very much around languages. So don't expect it to do all the math in the world or check your math, but use the tool the way you should. And realize that we've always had the preconceived notion of like, I can't read something because it's unstructured. Therefore, we always immediately say human exception, humans can read this. We now have a body of technologies that can actually work with unstructured text. An unstructured text could be that an order is inline in an email. It's not like formatted XML or horrible EDI, but realize we can solve those things now because we have many tools to solve for them. So it's first, we don't have to be afraid of unstructured text. We should embrace it and realize that computers are going to get it. Our customers have told us literally, Krista is 80% accurate on reading this, and we thought you were wrong. So we checked to work and realized our employees were far less accurate. So you got the right answers, humans got the wrong answers, because humans can't do the same thing over and over again without brain fatigue. So first thing is like realize we can work with unstructured text, and applying business rules no longer means give some vendor too much money for a rules engine that no one understands how to configure.
Right.
Have human beings tell you what the business rules are. And it can be the simple things like the order of invoice versus shipping have to be in the right order, but ask all of them. Make sure you get all 7 steps or all of these in the right order. Great. Then you don't have any data parsing errors from some crappy OCR. And then ask business rules like, is this allowed for this person? Can I ship a hazardous material code on this train? That you should be able to ask those business rules through language, not writing a huge rules engine. There's so many places that's going to change the way we do work. Business analysts, subject matter experts are going to write the rules in English, and they're not going to understand that they're asking things in natural language. They're not going to understand it's unstructured text, and they shouldn't have to, right? That's the point. They shouldn't have to. The technology should understand them and make that happen.
Yeah. If you take that, you gave a great example. Is it okay for me to ship this particular material via that particular delivery vehicle? In that case, it was a train. That's so much about the context that needs to be there. And that's I highlight this, Scott, because that's the thing you brought up a minute ago. So when someone wants to have tremendous success with leveraging these AI capabilities, even in the rank and file normal business they've been doing and already automating to some extent already, for our entire careers already, that getting that right is not as heavy a lift as you might think. That might sound implausible, but it's actually quite plausible. You just have to recognize that I've got the context. I just need to make sure that the solution I'm building this with is capable of connecting the dots for me, making those connections, by the way, uniquely every time it gets asked that question, because in fact, right, you can't presuppose everyone's context is the same, and that you can then deal with the fact that we don't get necessarily almost never, we don't usually get 100% yes, no's. We always get something less than that because, frankly, confidence cannot really be 100%. I don't want to go philosophy on us, but none of us are 100% confident in anything that we do. We're just sufficiently confident in what we do. And, I'm going to close my eyes and take a step. And I'd be a fool to say that I'm 100% confident that there's nothing on the floor that could hurt me, right? But I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked at it recently, but I'm pretty sure, right? So we're as close to 100% as possible there. Software has the same thing. But we have so much to learn about how to deal with that less than 100%, but high enough, right? We're used to software being binary. It either is or isn't, did or didn't, but it's actually how we live our daily lives anyway, right? So it's actually a false construct we've made for software to behave the way we currently think. It actually is becoming more human, the fact that it actually is somewhat fallible. But the fundamental point I'm making is you just think about how you would prepare for software to answer the question, can I ship this material via this particular vehicle? And you'll get the right answer. As long as you prepare the context correctly, you will get the right answer. And it's not that heavy a technical lift to do it. So that might be a really specific example, but that's a really good example of raising the expectation level. Because right now, your folks are looking up all of that stuff in books or codes, or they've got it as tribal knowledge in their head, and the new person has to learn all that stuff on the fly. you could have software handle that for us, right? And by the way, that might change. It might very well change. The rail line may have a special, maybe, may end up, by the way, it may actually be that rail is the perfect way to do that. And we're just making this up, guys. But the reality is managing the change of that is so much easier if it's something you're in our world. You're telling Krista, by the way, this is now the context for hazardous materials relative to rail. And that, instead of having to get your whole body of people to change their thinking about it, right? You realize we could be shipping on the trains for years now and you guys still don't do it. Yeah, you know what? I'm just sort of stuck in my ways. I'm doing the same thing that worked for you. I think they're being human, by the way. I think that's what they're actually doing. The fault is that they're human. So getting all the way back to the topic here, because I know that I take us off of it all the time. Your big AI projects in these two first areas, great. We'd love to help you with that. This is where it just becomes day in, day out. Everything you guys are doing with software really needs to be infused with NLP capabilities. And it isn't necessarily a complete restructuring your app. It's just much less human requirement for doing stuff that software can do. It's much more frequently straight through processed because we can do all that input validation ourselves. It's much more often that you can have a much better user experience for what they do have to enter, because you can be much more fuzzy or high confidence, but not precise matching and stuff. Lots of really good stuff, right? And that's the real point, is that NLP is actually a part of every app.
I love it. Thanks, John. Really appreciate you explaining all this in the series. And I love that you said in there, I don't know if you caught it, because, technology that understands people, but the software is becoming more human. So, I love that. And that's the mission. So thanks everyone for joining, and until next time.